Alright, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel, and welcome back to the From Computer to Cardboard series. This time, we are going to be looking at making a board game adaptation of one of my favorite games, and possibly one of the greatest games of all time, Outer Wilds, which you can see I'm currently flying around in at the moment, so we can have a look at some of the objects in the game. Now, originally choosing this game for this series, I knew that there was going to be a lot of, concepts and stuff that I would have to interpret as board game mechanics. And I kind of came to the conclusion that essentially Outer Wilds is kind of designed like an escape room. There is a win state where you literally do just escape. And everything up until that point is a series of interconnected puzzles. So in order to make a board game that might facilitate such an experience, I'm going to need to lean on some puzzle design skills. I'm going to need to look at the kind of different things that is going to work. Now, this series is going to have a bunch of spoilers in it, so if you have not played Outer Wilds, you should do that first. I really cannot exaggerate enough that is the thing that you should be doing first, because if you spoil the game of Outer Wilds, you cannot play and enjoy it, which is kind of a big problem. And so I greatly recommend going and playing the game first. But one of the problems in me having to design a lot of puzzles, I don't actually have a lot of experience when it comes to escape room games. I don't actually have a lot of experience in that kind of thing. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be bringing on longtime friend of the channel, Elise, who you may know from Scratch the Shelf, a board game design podcast we did a little while ago, or some other very cool things, such as a Grub Cup. The green screen absolutely hates this thing, but this is a wearable keychain board game. I'm not going to pull it apart because there's a bit of engineering in there, but Elise is my go-to because Elise knows a lot more about escape rooms than me, and she's going to set me on the right path to get me started working on the Outer Wilds board game. So I got her into a Discord chat, and well, here she is. And now I am joined by special celebrity guest, Elise. Now this is my escape room expert. Do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello. I am not an escape room expert, but I do very much like escape rooms.
You know more about it than me. Now, old ones will know you from the Cutlass Draft League, at least Battle League, which we did have some on my channel, some on your channel. You're in some of my Clock Tower videos
Yes.
from way back in the beginning. And we did have, for a period of time, a podcast together called From Scratch the Shelf, which actually did inspire From Computer to Cardboard, the video series that we're all trapped inside at this exact moment. Now,
Help.
yeah, the ceiling is too small. Now, in this episode, we are charged with trying to kind of solve Outer Wilds as a game design, interpreting it from the video game and converting it into what will be a board game. And kind of my initial conclusion when looking at Outer Wilds was that it should be an escape room. Basically, you're learning the parts of the puzzles and putting it all together to have that, winning game state. Because that's kind of how Outer Wilds feels to me. And now I've never made an escape room before, and so that's why I've brought on you, our celebrity specialist in the field, to kind of help me get started so we can start, thinking about how that's going to work. So what kind of essentials do you think an escape room needs?
Good question. I think we should just let's think about the quality. What is an escape room? So escape rooms usually have like an end goal. Usually this is getting out of the room. And because having a single step to get out of the room is often a little too easy, we add some things to make it more interesting, more challenging. And so I think also like people like escape rooms for like the immersive aspect of it, of like
There's
kind of
some storytelling involved, usually.
yeah, there's some storytelling. Um, so I think what was the question?
What's the key essential parts that we need to consider that makes up an escape room?
probably some good puzzles. I think also like the flow, because you want to kind of design the path between puzzles as well. So like
Yeah.
the puzzles are important, but how are people going to discover those puzzles? How are they going to move between them? Whether you're going to be blocked by solving one puzzle, so you have to do things in order.
Yeah.
The pacing of that, how many puzzles can you do at once? Those change the experience as well. So, and the storytelling aspect is, of course, for if the room you're trying to design has a focus on that immersion and the fantasy of it.
Some kind of connected narrative, yeah.
And the goal. I think the goal as well is important of, so people know what they're working towards is nice. So probably I think we can break it into those kinds of things to make one.
Okay.
Sometimes I think I like to start with the overall mood I'm trying to go for if I'm making an escape room. Not that I've like completed making an escape room. I've only got prototypes, but like as expert.
What is a game if not a collection of pieces?
Oh, yeah. Hang on, that's a whole nother thing. I could talk for hours about what a game is.
Yeah.
That's a discussion for another video.
Yeah. I want to do a whole episode, which is just what is a game, what is an activity.
Yeah. What is a toy?
Yeah.
What is a game?
Comes up a
What is
lot.
fun? I love talking about what is
Yeah,
fun.
comes
It's
up
probably
a
my
lot.
favorite thing to discuss.
So I want to circle back for a second because we kind of talked a little bit about how it's supposed to be connected, and I want to kind of run through, because in theory everyone watching this video should have fucking played Outer Wilds already. I'm hoping, otherwise this is kind of ruining it for you. But Outer Wilds has several modular locations that teach you things about the game until eventually you've learned not everything. I think you need maybe 85% of things to be able to do the final run, where there's, I think it's like 4 stops, and then you go to the end and you kind of solve it, and then you see what the finale sequence is. And so I think that's this just feels like a let the red car escape kind of puzzle, where you're like, okay, I don't know, I have to move this out of the way so I can move this other car, and then when you get to the final thing, oh yeah, the red car gets out. It's kind of how
that's the importance of having the goal, right? So that players know what they're working towards to get the red car out, because otherwise you won't know what to do first, or like what you need in order to do that. Like I think actually like a very important part of the escape rooms is that flow of like between puzzles. How do you know which one to start with? How do you go to the next one?
Yeah.
Because
or you start part of something and then you discover something is missing. You go, okay, I have this particular keyhole problem, and then you start some other thing. You go, well, this thing has a key in it, right?
Yeah. Or just like you see the keyhole before even seeing the other thing with the key, knowing you're now looking for a key can help redirect your attention to what you need next. Or sometimes, maybe you don't even want to present the thing with the key until you're one puzzle away from the one where you get the key, because then it can feel frustrating, people trying to focus on too many things at a time, know. Now I should disclose I haven't played Outer Wilds, but I know of it because I've watched Outer Wilds being played.
Having watched Outer Wilds means you can't play Outer Wilds.
Exactly.
So kind of fun.
I also I wasn't playing, so I don't remember a lot. And I think that's something we should probably talk about when it comes to translating this and playing something once, is that memory aspect, because once you've learnt something, it's difficult to unlearn it without time. So
I think there's also this problem of part of the core of Outer Wilds is exploration, because it doesn't actually tell you where anything is, where you need to be. It only tells you what you've done so far and potentially what you've learned from that. So there's never like, okay, you've done everything here, but this next thing, you have to go to this next place to find out what's next. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'll bump into something else then and maybe I'll learn something. But oftentimes the pieces of information will be about something somewhere else. Be like, oh yes, the orbital probe launcher had this thing happen there, and you're like, well, I'll go and have a look, I guess. And so I need to find a way to make a game that has some pseudo exploration in it, but also people that have played the video. I assume anyone that would play the Outer Wilds board game has to have played the video game already, and more specifically for this series as well, which means that they kind of already know what happens. So we also have to kind of consider that they know something about what's going to happen. We have to still kind of try and present something new within the confines of that interpretation.
What if you were just to take like the themes and the general like feelings that like and translate them across rather than like an identical story? Because then you wouldn't need someone who's played to you wouldn't need the player of the board game to have played the video game. I think like there's a lot of really interesting mechanics of Outer Wilds that would be great to just take and translate across, such as learning something or playing it with exploration and then taking what you learn and applying it somewhere and having that one time playthrough possibility. I think also, just on your note of exploration being a core part of the game, I like talking about types of fun, and exploring and discovering things is a huge part of fun, especially for me. It's my favorite type. And I think that can translate quite well in an escape room, of having those moments of encouraging like playfulness and getting people to interact with things because they want to interact with them, and discovering things along the way that they realize they can interact with or they can apply elsewhere. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like you need a huge universe to explore inside a tiny room. It can just be like, let's create opportunities for people to play.
Yeah. Yeah. And having some kind of space between things. A lot of the stuff that I design is like really mechanically rigid, because I come from having a person who is afflicted with knowing how to play Magic the Gathering. And so I think that this might need to be the kind of game where I broaden from that a little bit. Maybe we find some ways to be a bit looser with stuff, perhaps.
I think also instead of creating physical space between puzzles or areas of interest, you can also kind of make the players switch their mindset on things. So maybe they're interacting with something numerical and then having to switch to something that requires physical pushing, or maybe listening and then having something that requires texture. I think you can create this like faux sense of distance between things by just making people switch how they're interacting with something as well. So just variety of puzzles, perhaps.
Okay.
I think also like a variety of puzzles is pretty staple for an escape room as well. You don't want players to get too comfortable with like knowing how something works unless you're having like recurring motifs and themes and stuff. But you know, that whole solving aspect is fun, and you want people to get that feeling of, oh, this was uncomfortable and now and I've pushed through this challenge and now I've solved it. But you can't get that discomfort if people are too used to doing the same thing, or they know.
That's right. We need to find a way to have them bump up against a failure state multiple times before finding the thing where it all kind of comes into place. One of the main, like the key Outer Wilds experiences is fucking having this massive light bulb moment at 21 minutes in, and then the loop resets before you can actually complete doing the thing. So you have to kind of run back everything you just did, but slightly quicker, to like actually kind of, see the end of it. Like you solved the puzzle, you've figured it out in your head how it works, but you didn't have time to come and do the thing. But I want to talk about components, because I think this is going to be possibly the biggest and hardest hurdle, because I might be limited in what I can build.
Are you planning on building a physical escape room?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It needs to be play testable. So I have to design something that I can take to an event and I can get people to come and play. Because the other thing is that Outer Wilds is a single player experience. How am I going to get multiple people into this as well, potentially? So currently I'm thinking of like maybe the actual place where you are needs to be like denoted into sections, which maybe represents the different planets, or finding a way to segregate different players depending on how many players I'm expecting to put into this thing, and then maybe all of the players still represent the hatchling, like the main character, in some way, but like all together at once, and it's a cooperative thing. I don't see a way where it could be competitive. I think it should be cooperative, and then ideally it's Neil Patrick Harris made a game called Box One, which is an escape room board game in a single box. I think that's the same kind of vibe that I'm trying to do here. I want to have like enough things that I can fit in a single box in my Whopper, and make the game all come together. So hopefully a lot of easy stuff like cards. I have these really nice linking cubes. I don't know.
On the thought of single player versus multiplayer, I think with escape rooms, you kind of, especially a cooperative one, you are playing as one mind in this group where together you are learning and solving components. Like, even if one person was to do the actual puzzle, or maybe one person wasn't listening and was exploring like a back corner or something, ultimately you got through that puzzle and progressed together. And so you can kind of treat it as one player. I think a really interesting thing that you can do with escape room design is that you can scale up the number of players for a room based on how many puzzles can be worked on at once at any point in the room. So if there's 2 puzzles that can be solved right from the start, it can be 2 players doing that and having a good time, but it would be still challenging because if one person's unable to do it, then the other person has to come over and help. And when you have bigger team numbers, obviously 2 people can you can split the workload between the 2 puzzles. But if it was a very linear room that only had 1 puzzle that you could do at a time, having 8 people trying to solve one puzzle isn't going to be very fun. So if you wanted to create this multi-person experience, you could just create more things that could be worked on. But also with this collective learning and discovering, which I think you probably want to take away from Outer Wilds, you can have parts that like reference older things or reference the knowledge that you've learned, and together as a team, they'd be able to talk about what they know and pull that together. I don't think it would be an issue unless you did just want a linear experience for one person.
I think if we look at how travel is designed in Outer Wilds, right? Yeah, it's always like, let's say there's 7 points of interest on one planet. Each of those points of interest does not necessarily interact with other specific points of interest on the planet. There's sometimes that they are, because they're like you have to figure out a thing to get to this other new place. But most of them are like, this is either an enclosed story, or this is pointing you to another different planet, or this is part of a solution for a different puzzle. And so then when you're stuck somewhere, you then go to another place, right? But if you design it as a web, right? Imagine like a big old spider's web. We're like, okay, here is a node here that's connected to these 4 other things, and is a gate for this, but is not a gate for this, or like these are entry points into it. And then it's trying to figure out what all the different things are going to be to figure out how it's supposed to all come together. I think that's what the big challenge is going to be here.
Also, obscuring future goals as well might be important, because you don't want to kind of lay out the roadmap from the start, because sometimes it's fun to discover there is extra steps before you can do things. And I think having literally like a graph going like, you are here, there are 2 puzzles to go to next, is not going to be very fun for the player, unless they're into that. It depends on the style of the room, of course. Something that came to mind is like a texture on a wall that you could think is just part of the wall, not very interesting, or maybe like you have a fake tree in the room with tree bark, right? And if to somebody who doesn't know, it looks like a tree or it looks like a texture, and then maybe you get a clue or a piece of the puzzle that has the pattern of the bark, or maybe it has the pattern of the wall, and now you're like, oh, this thing that was here I can now interact with, and I can use something over here. I think that's a fun way of doing it, where you have the pieces except for one thing that tells you what you can interact with. Probably something like that to create the same effect of like, you can travel everywhere, but like, where do you need to travel to?
Yeah, I really like that idea of this was a thing that was there from the start and you dismissed it as useless, and then something has added context to it to make it become relevant.
Yeah.
Now, I have the advantage of knowing exactly where the game is going to be run in advance. It's going to be in an office space. And so perhaps I might have to design some things that would sit in the office and not, be out of place, and find a way to hide things in that.
It's a really interesting point because again on the types of fun, subversion is a type of fun, and I think by having something that you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't be interacting with that thing, and then discovering that it's not the case does kind of trigger that fun of like, oh, this is something I didn't expect, or something, breaking the fourth wall slightly. I think to be used in moderation as well, and also if every room does it, it doesn't become this fun, surprising thing anymore. It almost becomes like this expectation.
You're just waiting to be subverted. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of modern content ends up being like that, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's just food for thought at the moment. But yes, so you could use subversion, or you could have I was thinking another part of the puzzle, like maybe if it was office themed, you just said office, but like maybe a computer monitor and the air vents at the back like had that pattern. So it was still part of the room, and still part of the puzzles that came into this room. But you knew.
Yeah, I'm looking for a fan and extract the fan and then go, oh wait, but the computer, my fucking gaming PC, is filled with them. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Let me just mute that real quick. Yes. Quick. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, but then another part of escape rooms, which people often use as a rule for designing rooms, is each component or each item should only be used once. Which kind of breaks the rule I was talking about before. Well, not rule, but like this idea, right? So they say this, you should only use each component once, because it stops people from worrying. It like lets people kind of clear their headspace when they're done interacting with something. So
completed.
they have these
Yeah.
already done that. They don't have to carry them around. They don't have to think about how they're going to use them because it's already done.
Yeah.
So I think that if you were to use like some other component of a puzzle, it would have to be pretty obvious which zone was the part you're interacting with and which zone was miscellaneous deco, or which if it was against a wall, obviously you wouldn't be using that, but if it was in the middle of the room that was two-sided, maybe a bit more obvious. But I think it is important to be careful of, because you don't want to you don't want to tire out the player from having to think about too many things at once. And you want, in the end, you're designing an experience for people, and so you want them to feel, you're not trying to like actually trap them in, you're trying to make them feel smart, that they have solved something and done something incredible.
Right? Yeah, you have to create this thing that feels like it has a level of difficulty to it, but through following the recipe, there's a cake at the end, right? Like cooking seems like wizardry when someone goes, see this egg and this bag of flour, I'm going to turn this into your favorite thing ever to eat. You go, sure thing, boss. And then it comes out of the oven and you're like, holy shit, that's really cool. I think that's kind of the idea. We need to show them all the components and that are kind of junk. And then as they combine everything and it all comes together, they go, oh, wow, we discovered this really cool thing at the end.
But and then instead of the explicit instructions, we just show them the egg and the whisk, and we just let them do it. And maybe there's a thing that says like, this is what a successful egg looks like, and then they do it and they feel really smart that they've then found they found something for the flour. And then when they think, I've made this cake all by myself, I'm so awesome, then they get the joy of doing that, and we've designed the experience that gets them there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we put out the flour, we put the oven, the flour, the egg, and they just put the flour straight in the oven, like they're gonna feel a little silly, and they're not gonna get the outcome they want, and it's gonna be really slow. So you have to like lay things out in pieces. We should make a baking escape room. That sounds very funny.
That would be sick, actually. It would be really funny if there's just lots of ingredients around, and you don't know what the thing is that you're going to be baking until the end, and you're finding the different steps in different places. And you're like, oh, I've discovered a whisk. That means that the egg must be beaten or something. You know, you find a sieve, and you're like, oh, with the flour must be sieved or something.
Yeah, yeah. In the case of that, I think it's so important to kind of like designate these zones for people to be like, oh, this is where all the ingredients are, because you don't want people to think I have to take the ingredients out of the room to interact with other things. Like you can probably use like color, shape, texture, things like that to make things feel like they should belong in this
All the red
area.
stuff goes in the red room.
Yeah. I think having too many things for the players to interact with that aren't used would probably lead to people insisting, like being, what if they tunnel vision on the bag of oats that aren't in the recipe, and they're like, we definitely need these oats, and start carrying them around everywhere and trying to use them. So you need to really limit everything people can interact with, but make them think they found the thing that they need to interact with.
Yeah, I think that's a lesson that we learned from playing Clock Tower enough times. When you see the guy that's just like, oh no, I'm so convinced that this worldview has to be correct, I'm just going to run this man down until we all kill him and then find out we lose.
Yeah, for sure. But then, if you're in a room, in a physical space with other people where you are blocked because you cannot progress to the next puzzle, and you're taking up everyone else's time, and now you need to go reset this room, it's like even worse almost than, I guess, Clock Tower is a long game, but it makes you think.
Okay, so I think I've got some ideas to kind of get me started. I should have been taking notes this whole time, but the upside of recording it is I can rewatch it. I think I have some places to help get me started. I'm thinking I'm going to denote space in the same way that Outer Wilds does, by finding the different planets and then separating them away. I'm thinking something like standees, like acrylic standees, probably like a really easy way to do that. Trying to keep it feeling as much like a board game more so than an escape room, I think, is the goal, to try and keep it back to that box one kind of idea. And so then having, the different sections for different planets, I think is probably a good place to start. I'm going to have to go and do some puzzle design and figure out how all of that is going to work together, and draw my big web of puzzles and figure out, what's a gate, what's a key, and all that kind of stuff. But I think I have enough to get started. What's probably going to happen is I'm going to spend 4 hours working on something and be like, Elise, I fucked it all up. I need your help again.
You'll be fine.
Which is funny.
I think you just gotta get creative with it. I think if you're structuring these pillars around the room, players are gonna you want to surprise them. I think there's a lot you can do with the discovery, and maybe it's not the areas that you are. Maybe it's one central area.
It would actually be so sick if they're so convinced they're playing a board game, and then the game just instructs you. It's like, look up, and they're like, huh? And there's like shit on the ceiling. There's like clues up here. They're like, wait a minute, the room's actually been prepared to have stuff happening in it. And you're like, wait, what the hell? Yeah. I'm in an escape room. I'm not playing a board game. So maybe I should get crazy with it. I have to keep in mind that I have to somehow film this experience in a way that I can explain how it's supposed to work to the audience.
Yeah. I think yeah, think about what experience you want to make. What is the feeling you want to evoke? Think about how many players you want to do this for, and then if you have already some fun puzzles you want to include, think about how they might incorporate them. When do you want to do them? Try not to have too many similar puzzles next to each other, and I don't know, create a little story for it. You got this.
Yeah, I do have some ideas about narrative, because I think that there's kind of an existing narrative in Outer Wilds, but the way it's delivered is like a historical record. It's like, these are things that have happened, and there's other things that have happened that are like way less important. And it's like, maybe we pick something on that and like, well, maybe this is actually the thing that you care more about, and just like add a layer to something that exists already. So a person who's played the game already doesn't already know everything. They like start to discover new things. They're like, wait a minute, which would be kind of cool. And then I think most of it's just going to be me going and playing Outer Wilds and then like writing down all the information nodes and stuff that they do have, and then figure out which ones are going to be important to me and how I can communicate that and stuff.
Do some escape rooms as well.
I should do some escape rooms. I want to watch some playthroughs. Like there's the Exit series, which is really popular. I do actually want to go through Box One. My current only reference is a single episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where they do a team building exercise, which is an escape room. I don't know if that's really the best reference for a game designer.
Well, you're missing out. Escape rooms, I think, are the best form of media, the best form of entertainment by far at the moment, and you're definitely missing out. And they're fun to think about as well because it's a multimedia challenge with people at the center of it working together most of the time who know the goal, and figuring out how to get there. I just think it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to see what you do with it.
Yeah, well, for those of us that are here on the YouTube watching, we'll hopefully be able to find out shortly. Maybe I do actually succeed. It would be really awkward to, in Season 2, have to retire defeated. But I think you've given me a good start. I think I'll be able to figure something out. And then we'll see how it goes, I guess.
If you viewers at home got something out of this, congrats. I'm impressed. And thanks for staying all the way to the end of this video on Keith's channel.
That's right. And here on the Cutlass Board Games channel, where at this exact time, I'm going to put up some cards. We're going to have like a subscribe button. I'm going to cover my ugly face with like a random video for you to watch, and then like the whole From Computer to Cardboard playlist as well. Maybe I'll be like hidden in the middle here somewhere, or I can wave and say goodbye.
I'll just point at various directions, and you can
you can click. Yeah, try and click the mouse where my finger is exactly right now, and then we'll see you in the next episode.